And next we have Chekaya Glaspie. With over 15 years of collective clinical trial, project management, and medical communications experience, she previously worked with some of the largest pharmaceutical and medical device companies in the US. Trained in GCP and ICH guidelines and requirements, she holds a bachelor's degree in Cardiorespiratory Science from the University of South Alabama, Mobile, Alabama, and a master's in business administration from Webster University in St. Louis, Missouri. Her goal is to work with and introduce physicians and patients of color to the clinical research industry. Ultimately, she would like to create a research engagement initiative in the St. Louis region, making it a major touchpoint for small to mid-sized pharmaceutical and biotech companies who are seeking diverse patient data and clinical sites. Let's give a warm welcome to Chekaya as she joins our TEDx stage.
Hello. How's everyone doing today? Good. Thank you for having me. I have to be honest, I am super nervous, okay? You would think I wouldn't be because I have to do these talks for work. Not necessarily this kind of talk, but this is a little different, right? So what I'm gonna talk to you guys today about is fear, faith, and honor, the African American journey to clinical research. Let me see. When we think about history, I think we kind of see the recurring theme, right? Like history has to be addressed because if you don't address it, it is bound to repeat itself. One of the things that I think is important is to really talk about fear. And one of the speakers talked about fear. And I think initially when you think of fear, people think of like the boogeyman, right? Or you think of Freddy Krueger, at least I do. But when you think about fear in the context of the African American journey, you think about our history, right? One of the things that I also think about fear when I look at this picture is I had a friend call me and she mentioned that she had to get a biopsy and she thinks that it may be like cervical cancer. So we're gonna stick a pin in that and come back to it. And then also take note of the women on this picture. Because when you think of African American culture, women, Black women, are pretty much the bedrock to our culture. Next slide. So, still in the vein of fear, for African Americans, you have to look at the history and why we don't want to participate in clinical research. So it's not just it's not just one thing, but there are past atrocities that happen that we all know about that prevent us from wanting to participate. You have things called white coat syndrome. So patients will go to the doctor and initially on the ride in, everything's fine. You feel great. You're just going in for a regular checkup. However, once you step into the office, your blood pressure goes up, your heart rate goes up. That's white coat syndrome. You're nervous, you have anxiety, all of that. Also, that comes from our history. The picture you see here is reflective of the Tuskegee experiment, and not going into great detail about it, but basically African American males were given syphilis, unbeknownst to them. And this study went on into the 70s. Several of them died. Syphilis was passed on to their partners, and this study was done by the government, the US government. Also, still in the vein of fear, our Jewish brothers and sisters, when they went through the Holocaust and concentration camps, research was done on them. Freezing studies were done, so they were left outside to basically see what the effects of hypothermia would be. There were studies done on twins. So you have to factor all of those atrocities in when you're thinking about this process of wanting African Americans to participate in clinical research, because the foundation of what we are going to initially think of are studies like this. There were also studies done to African American females, women. Those women were operated on from a gynecological standpoint without any pain medicine. Therefore, even now, you have physicians, lay people, other clinicians who think that African Americans have a higher pain tolerance than other ethnicities, and that's just not true. Next slide. I think when you're tackling this wanting to recruit and include more African Americans into clinical research, we have to think about the root. And again, like I said, I believe the root are the women in the African American society. I also think epigenetics is a really true factor, and that's the transgenerational genetics. So transatlantic slavery coming across the transatlantic, post-Reconstruction, the civil rights movement, all of those things are stressors. All of those things are fears. That fear releases chemicals within the body. Those chemicals then can then transcend generations. And I think those are some of the things that we're still dealing with to this day. I think what I also really enjoyed from sitting here was seeing what I call the washout of that. I think we're slowly seeing the washout by addressing the mental illness or mental wellness within our culture. Hopefully starting our own businesses that really focus on the needs, whether it be mental wellness needs, our other health needs, things of that nature. The other thing to mention about this is the weathering effect on Black women and the amount of stress that we have to take on when we are in the society. So the extra work and extra stress, again, adds to that fear. So what do? Right? Like, we understand the history of it, we get the epigenetics. So how do we move past it? That's where faith comes in. And in the African American culture, we know that faith plays a huge part in how we move forward. It's been a strong foundation for us. And I think even today, a lot of people who have been on this stage, that's faith, right? Like, you're moving past your fear. And so it can be complex, it can be scary, but we as a culture now have to move forward. Because if we do not, what I fear is that we will be left behind with regards to our medical care. And so if we are fearful of sharing information, let's say with Caucasian doctors or Asian doctors, then let's figure out how we can recruit more African American physicians. How can we get them in this space so we can then connect with them when we go to the doctor? They can recruit us to participate in studies. So we have to be more active in that recruitment, also in the recruitment of the C-suite and seeing more African Americans there, seeing African Americans own clinical research organizations, so then we know, like, our data is staying within us, within our community. Next slide. Next slide. So now we're at the faith. So now how do we honor that, right? So we've talked about the fear, moving past fear, we're going to faith. Now, how do we move to honoring that? And I think that it's multifocal. I think you have to incorporate your community and making sure that they're involved. And it can't be a one-time incorporation. It has to be something that's going to be done over time. I think it has to be intentional as well. There are a couple of organizations that are already in the process of collecting data and doing things to try to help us from a health perspective. The Jackson Heart Study, which is based in Jackson, Mississippi, the government officials and other community organizations have come together to collect data to help figure out how to address the cardiovascular issues within that community, right? And that will then potentiate to other communities within the US. You also have the All of Us project with NIH, where they're also collecting data on not just African Americans, but all different ethnicities to hopefully develop better treatments to address health concerns across the board. There was one statistic that I forgot to mention was African Americans, we make up approximately 14% of the population, yet we're only 5% of clinical trial participation. So when you are taking a medication, whether it be Tylenol, amlodipine for your high blood pressure, insulin, if we don't participate in these studies, that's the answer to why your diabetes can't be controlled or why your blood pressure isn't being controlled. That's some of it. So we have to increase that participation. If you are a clinician, a physician, be more active and proactive to recruiting African Americans into your studies. Ask them, do they want to participate? There's a cultural competency component there. So sometimes we may ask more questions. It may come across like we're suspicious, because we are suspicious. So answer our questions. If you can develop an FAQ before, share that FAQ with us. Partner with other organizations that focus on recruiting patients of color. There are a lot of those organizations that are being developed, and they're being developed by people of color. So my call to you guys today is to be aware of the health concerns that are out there for African Americans. If you are, again, a clinician, get involved. If you're not involved in clinical research, do your best to try to find out more about clinical research, which is the study of safety and clinical effectiveness of the pharmaceutical and medical device industry, and try to encourage people that you know to participate more, and that if they have questions, try to direct them on where they can go and what they can do in order to push past the fear and step across into faith and honor. Next slide. Next slide. That was actually a brain break I was going to do, and I forgot about that. So I want to talk about this woman right here. Her name is Henrietta Lacks, and she is pretty much, I don't know if you guys have heard of the HeLa cell, the immortal life of Henrietta Lacks. And so basically she went in, and I was trying to pitch it up or tee it up. And I was like, oh, this is going to be my friend. This is my friend with cervical cancer. But this is Henrietta Lacks. She had cervical cancer. And so she went in to get her biopsy, and the biopsy, or some of the cells from her biopsy, were taken. And those cells were then replicated, I want to say over 75,000 times, and they are still in play. Those cells are immortal and have been used to create several drugs for AIDS, for in vitro fertilization, for the development of certain treatments for diabetes. So the point is that if we don't participate, we could be holding back on the discovery of the cure for cancer, right? Or the cure for sickle cell, right? So we just need to step past fear and participate in the clinical research trials. Ask as many questions as you can. I'm not saying become a Henrietta Lacks, but what I'm saying is that gene, that one gene from that one Black woman, has potentiated drugs and vaccines that have kept a lot of us here today. So that's the end of my speech. Thank you for my time.